I jumped out of the bed and ran to my bedroom door. I stood there for a moment listening to the shrieks echoing in the hallway. I was terrified to see what would be on the other side of that door because I knew that the moment that I opened it, I couldn't unsee it. My life would change forever. I knew that if I thought for one more second about it, I would never make a decision, so I acted on impulse. I flung the door open to see my mother soaked in her own blood, standing with her arms raised above her head in defense. My eyes then moved to a man running around in a black long-sleeve shirt, a ski mask, and no pants, and my gaze was stuck to this naked ass of this man, and I stood there frozen. I had so many questions, I was confused. It was all so surreal. I looked back where my mother was standing to see her lying face down in a pool of blood. My mind was racing, and at first I mistook her for my sister because she looked so small lying there. She turned around onto her back, and he ran over to her. And I could see his arm moving up and down in a quick motion. And it took my brain a second to realize that he was stabbing my mother repeatedly. I remember running over to him and beating on his back, and I pushed him and I tugged his shirt to get him away. I yelled, but I couldn't hear my own voice. My senses went numb. I looked around the kitchen for something to hit him in the head with or for another knife. I tried to remember some of those martial arts moves that I knew. I was at a standstill. He moved away from my mother, and for a moment it was just her and I. I looked down at her and talked to her. I'd like to think that I told her that I loved her, but I can't say for sure that I did. I know that I said sorry over and over again. I asked her what to do. She couldn't speak, but she used all of her energy to move her eyes in the direction of the door. She wanted me to run. While he was busy torturing my stepfather, I assessed the obstacle course in front of me. I tried to figure out how long it would take me to run to the front door and where I would go when I got through it. I made a run for it, but I heard him say, "Get back here." And I could see his shadow looming in the doorway of the kitchen. And I screamed and I fumbled with the locks on the door. And when he started to come toward me, I just surrendered. I said, "Okay," and I threw my hands up, and he grabbed a fistful of my hair and threw me to the ground. As he dragged me back to the kitchen, all I could do was stare up at the knife, hovering just above my throat. I thought about everything my life was, and what it had become in just a few short seconds. I couldn't believe that it had all come to this, that this was how I was gonna die. He stopped dragging me, and for a moment, everything was still. I braced myself for the plunge of the knife, but it didn't come. I realized that he was no longer standing above me, and I slowly started to get up, and I could see him standing over my mother. I knew what he was gonna do, but I couldn't stop him. When I was little, I used to have these nightmares that someone was chasing me, but every time I tried to run, my legs just wouldn't work. I was paralyzed from the waist down. And every time this creature would catch me, and I'd wake up in some cold sweat and an urge to pee, because it was terrifying. And this was one of those dreams, only it was happening in real life. I watched as he grabbed her face and tilted her head back to finish her off, but my legs wouldn't move. It happened in slow motion before my very eyes, but I was too slow to stop it. And when it was over, he slapped her in the face and laughed before saying, "Now you're out of the way." I shut up and ran over to her. I kept screaming, "Why would you do that? She wasn't going to do anything. She couldn't fight back." I stood over her and wept. I knew that she was gone, but I wanted nothing more than to lay with her on that kitchen floor forever. But on the other side of the kitchen counter, I could hear my stepdad's screams, and I knew that I had to do something. I ran over to where my stepfather was huddled in the corner, his arms blocking his face from the knife that came toward him. I kept telling him to stop. I'd say, "This isn't you, what are you doing? You don't have to do this." But I could see it in his eyes that there was no getting through to him. He was too far gone. I decided to make another run for it. I looked back at my mother one last time before bolting for the door.